Hello everyone. I think we are live now. We're living through the biggest shift in software development since the internet itself. While some teams are still debating whether to use AI tools, others are already rebuilding their entire approach around AI-first principles. Today, we're diving into what it actually means to build AI-first software teams, not just adopting a few tools, but fundamentally rethinking how we ideate, build, ship software, as well as staying on the right side of the AI. I'm your host, Rajesh, technical architect at TechGrit, and you're listening to TechGrit Talks. Today, we bring yet another episode focusing on evolution of AI in software development. My guest joining us today is someone who doesn't just talk about AI-first development, he lives it every day. His team has been experimenting with AI-augmented workflows since 2023, and they have learned some hard lessons about what it takes to make this transition successful as well as responsibly. He is a senior principal engineer at United Health Group and a very good friend of TechGrit, Mr. Venkat Kakula. Welcome, Venkat. So before we jump into AI first, let's just level set on what we mean by AI first. We are not talking about just adding ChatGPT to your workflows or using Copilot for code completion. We're talking about teams which have redesigned their entire approach from how they gather requirement to how they architect systems to how they think about roles and responsibilities. So let's begin. So Venkat, one of the first questions, right, that I'm curious about is how has AI changed the way your team approaches projects now, end to end?
Before I answer that question, because again, we are speculating a little bit here, let's talk. I would like to begin with let's understand what's real, what we know for certain, right? Let's start with the point of certainty.
Sure.
So in terms of that, we know we can bet very reliably that the capability of these AI models is going to keep growing. So what I mean by that, the speed at which they perform, the complexity of the tasks that they can achieve, and the type of things it can do, right? All of these is going to keep growing over time.
Okay.
So in terms of that, right? So let's keep that in mind and work our way backwards and how that will affect teams now and into the future. So as of now, right? What I'm seeing is there's a lot of activity in certain areas, a lot of attention being given to certain areas, like coding, right? The ability for models to code. It's very important. I don't want to demean it, but the fact is that there's a lot of focus on it. And rightfully so, right? I mean, that's a very tangible thing that we can taste and teams can utilize. At the same time, right? There's, if you think about it, only 30 to 40% of the time team spend is actually on coding. There's conceptualization, there is the ideation, conceptualization, the whole idea of solutioning, and then coming up with an experience around it, and then finally, kind of, building the requirements and then actually building it. So we're talking about like a small slice of the pie. And the potential to apply it end to end is huge. And yes, teams are evolving and figuring things out, how to apply these across these life cycles, right? So that's one, right? How do you ideate using AI? I think there's a huge, amazing untapped opportunity that we are looking into when it comes to ideation, because when you put the method to the madness, when you utilize these tools, right, they're amazing, ensuring that you get a really flushed out requirement, so you're not missing any blind spots, and your application is as true as it can be out of the block, right? So that we don't have to go through multiple iterations to finally get it right? Because and that's where I think AI can help, and also refinement, right? User experience, and I think the whole SDLC lifecycle will be kind of rewritten. The whole playbook is kind of rewritten from what I understand. So in terms of teams, that's true, right? And let's talk also about people. The team is, the most important resource is our people, is our talent. And right now, a lot of roles are, in a typical team, you have your, kind of a product owners, which is business owners, and then handing off things to your an analyst, and handing off things to your solution architect, and then handing off things to your UX professional, handing off things to your development, and then testing, and so on and so forth. So you have all these all these roles and then the PM role playing on top of it. And let's think why, right? If you think about it, the reason all these roles exist, it takes 8 hours a day of dedicated time to play that role, right? It takes that time, someone to be there, to do it manually. And with AI walking in door, a lot of these tasks, what's happening is that a lot of the burden, right? It's not going to replace the person, but it's going to alleviate the burden. It's going to ease that burden of the task. The task of coding is eased. It's not taken away. Someone has to oversee it. Someone has to
Correct.
make sure it fits into the whole overall picture. And then if it's going wrong, someone has to course correct. So you still
Agree.
need that senior, like that persona to ensure that things are on track. But the fact is the time burden has gone down, right? Now, the time you need to spend maybe with the proper utilization of AI can be vastly reduced. And this provides the opportunity to perform role consolidation, where, again, there is two parts to it. One is time consolidation, the skill consolidation. You don't have to be a Java expert. AI can do that. All we need is really, really good common sense, right? And a technical acumen. And that to me is the key ingredient of a good team, is that ability to use great common sense to ensure that, hey, AI just spat something out. Can I look at it, even though certain things are new to me, right? I'm not maybe an expert in the area, but still I'm able to apply my common sense and make a great judgment on whether to keep it or toss it. So those are the kind of things that we need to keep in mind. So to get back to the point now with time and skill consolidation, now an analyst can probably do a little bit of UX because I guess some of the burden is taken away. They don't need to understand how to work with certain tools because AI is bridging that gap. All they need to have is a clear vision and a great idea and ability to kind of articulate things the right way. And guess what? The AI can really, really help them accelerate. So there is that consolidation.
Okay. Yeah, I think that sounds really powerful, Venkat. But talking about role consolidation, I imagine some of your team members might be still wondering about, right, which skills to pick up or, right, what to do next in future. So how is your team taking this change?
Yes.
Right.
I mean, people are anxious, rightfully so. And you have to, be normal to feel certain level of anxiety. But that said, I think there is always room, like I said, the whole profile of how to adapt. Again, if you're a mindset where you want to continue doing what you want to do all day, then maybe yes, you need to worry. But if you are a person who is open to ideas, who is, again, like possess, the ability to apply common sense, to me, like articulation and common sense are like amazing combination, right? And then third thing is to really work well with others, right? So if you adapt easily, if you're easygoing, you can easily step into, hey, something new is out there, and you love to learn new things, then absolutely, like then your goal. I mean, nobody's gonna try to replace you, because to me,
Right.
like that's a skill set you absolutely need.
Yeah. Okay. So, Venkat, could you just walk me through the process of how AI helps you evolve an initial idea? How do you get started with it, or right? What are the
Absolutely, right?
tools that you use, like early
Yeah,
stage tools that you use?
absolutely, right. I mean, in terms of tool set, right? I think some of the straight up models are fantastic, used as they are, like the raw ingredients are being fantastic. So some of these models are amazing, the multimodal ones. So
Right.
for ideation, right, I think there is, you can have a method to the madness, right? It's like, I'm going to throw like vibe coding is a term where
Okay.
people are
Yeah.
just randomly
Totally.
stepping in. And vibes, to me, like vibe is nothing but a short-term ephemeral thoughts that you would normally toss away. Now you can entertain them and then put them to work.
Correct.
So it's stuff like that, right? So that comes to the foray. But in terms
Mhm.
of how I would use a tool set, right? To come back to the question, how I use a tool set. First of all, put some structure around how I do things. I mean that how I ideate stuff. So
Correct.
what do? I collect material, I do research, I talk to experts, right? I do all these things, and I'm collecting data. The question is, how am I using the data to drive what I need? So I think that's
Understood.
what
Yeah.
AI is
Mhm.
amazing at. When you ask the right questions, even the questions, right? Like, hey, am I asking the right question? AI can help you there. So I think you can start from the very basics of, hey, am I asking the right questions? Am I asking complete list of questions?
Correct.
There's something I'm missing. There's something I'm blind to. That's where you can fill the gaps in, ask the question, collect the data, And it's a lot of data. You have transcripts, you have requirements documents, you have market research documents, like all of it, right? Existing competitor data. You AI is amazing at chomping it up and then spitting out a cohesive, comprehensive layout. Take this information in and kind of put it in a way that makes sense to you. And that's one step one, right? And how you do it, the X number of ways to do it. What I do is, as an example, I would go to Gemini 2.5. You can upload PDFs, and I describe those PDFs, and hey, go through all of this in this manner, and I apply certain, let's say, level of importance to each of them and the role of each of them. And then I say, hey, go through it and tell me what's happening here. And you'll be blown away by some of the results you get, right? It's just amazing. And imagine the amount of time being saved there. That's step one, right? And then you can work through it. And then you can put some structure to it and then say, you know what? Okay, can you suggest me some ways of actually solving it? And then you can pick from your list, right? So you can, even for ideation, right? That's where you continue on from there. So you have your start, you're satisfied, you're, kind of from what you see, what you've collected so far. And then you want to, hey, let's give this a run. Let's see what happens. And then you can ideate from there. You can create a prototype from there. And one of the things I did as an example was I created something called, I called a manifest. And I got it off some articles. It's not my original idea. But anyway, I loved it. So what I did was it's a computer readable file. I said, take all of this and then generate me a computer readable file that I can use it to keep my AI in check while it's doing its vibe coding thing. And guess what? It did, right? It did amazing. Zero shot. It was a fantastic result. So I'm more than ever convinced that there are things you can do to keep your ideas, alive and keep your, AI again is very expressive. If you let it go, it'll go off to the rail. It can go off in tangent, but there are methods you can use to keep things in line and in certain within boundaries of what you define. So anyway, I know it's a very little bit of a generalized answer, but again, it is. I think it's fantastic, and it's definitely something people should try.
Right. I think a lot of viewers will find relevance with that. So you mentioned vibe coding, right? So I guess more and more developers are getting enticed by it, every day. So do you think they will continue to lean more and more towards vibe coding, or is there a tipping point where they will just stop, and we still have conventional methods of coding will still be relevant?
I think vibe coding is, I think the name gives it a bad rap because vibe is like, if you think about it, it's like, very hippie the way it sounds.
Agree.
But I think if we think deeply about it, vibe is a micro thought. Like it's a ephemeral, I call it ephemeral idea, right? An idea that you like, hey, this is so awesome. And then said, oh man, it's gonna be hard. I'm not gonna ever do it. And you let it go, right? And this time you can hang on to it, right? Instead of saying, it would be cool to build that small app. Guess what? Right now you have a machine that's ready to go, right? And then you don't have to do a lot of work. It'll do a lot of work for you. All you have to do is kind of ride that horse. So you don't have to run all the way. So I think just that is a huge thing. That's groundbreaking, right? I think it's amazing that people have discovered it in this way. But to me, that's a game changer in my mind. And vibe coding is, again, we can vibe again. Like I said, vibe coding is the way people picturize it is a very hippie way. Like you're just sitting in a corner and then you kind of talking to the computer saying, hey man, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? Instead of that, you can put structure. I call it the method to the madness. You can put structure around it. You can streamline it. You can control that. Imagine that you can control that powerful force, what can you do with it, right? It's so through structure and through certain mechanisms and methods. Like an example I said, I use the manifest. I use data driven. Then I ask AI to say, create a computer readable single page requirements document that my vibe coding machine can just check things off. But guess what? It allows me to control because I can go in and say, hey, this button is blue, I can call it red. So it gives me semblance of control. It gives me semblance of retrying, saying, hey, it was close, maybe I'll give it a shot, right? It's so cheap to do it. It's so inexpensive. So I think this phenomenon is absolutely here to stay. I think all you would see is more structure around it, more rigor around it. and then you'll see maybe certain name changes. But anyway, I think it'll become a mainstay because some of the vibe coding stuff, when we broke it down, it's fantastic. The quality is fantastic in this day and age, and it's only going to get better. So I
Yeah.
don't think this is going to go away anytime soon.
And I personally have a lot of half-baked GitHub private repositories, some projects, which I don't think like I would ever get back to. But I think with this, maybe I'll give it another shot. I'll just make sure that it runs. So yeah, I
Yeah. I mean,
completely
so
agree
many
with
ideas
you.
in this
Yeah.
world, right?
Correct.
Now,
Yeah.
this is making it possible. So it's definitely
Yeah.
something to definitely double down on.
Correct. Yeah. Let's move to so for the leaders who are listening to us right today, right, our viewers. So if someone wants to start tomorrow, what would be your practical advice? What are the tools that they should start using, right, to realize their ideas or to make sure that right they're on the right track? Um, how
Absolutely.
do they choose it, right? Like, what's the process behind choosing certain tools?
I think from a leadership perspective, there are two main like that headaches is one, how do you make your teams, remake your teams rather? How do you make sure that you're hitting that high productivity, however you figure it out, right? How do you improve productivity to that extent?
Mhm.
And then the other thing is like you mentioned, tool set. I think from a tool set perspective, the answer is somewhat easy because really, I think it somehow at least at this point of time, it's very stack dependent in terms of what you typically tend to do. For example, if you are primarily a Google stack, um, Gemini is fantastic because it's, again, it's no brainer that, their Gemini being a Google product will be super well versed in their ecosystem. Similarly, if you are playing a lot on the AWS ecosystem, then absolutely, right? And if you're doing a lot on data science, then like something Databricks, the different platforms bring you different kind of capabilities. I think
Mhm.
the tools define themselves if once you get serious about it. And then the general tool set like Cursor, and I love Cursor. I used it.
Yeah,
I use GitHub Copilot. I tried a bunch of
we
tools.
we do at
They're
TechGrit too.
all, yeah, they're
Yeah,
all getting to a point where they're all ridiculously good.
correct.
I
Yeah,
get it. The gap between them is so narrowing so much because the models that are underpinning
getting
them
better and better.
are the
Yeah,
same. Like
yeah.
pretty much, you use the models, and the gaps between the models themselves are the improvements are also kind of panning out because the 80% use case is already there, right? It's all hidden in the
Correct.
use
Yeah.
case. Unless you have some niche use case that requires some super awesome talent, then maybe you need to wait for the next model. But the
Right.
models today are able to do pretty much anything, right? So in that sense, right? So tool set perspective, that's where it is. I think is the teams have plethora of choices. I think you can't really go wrong as long as you remain the mainstream tool set.
Mm-hmm.
They're all really great. The top
Understood.
5, 10, guess what? They're awesome. But let's talk from a leadership challenges from a team perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you how you make up the team, because we talked about the team makeup, earlier. I think from a leader's perspective, it's how do you ensure that your team is able to perform at the level? Because again, I mean, think of it like if you have the right person and you're putting an Iron Man suit on them, right?
Right.
A normal
Exoskeleton
person
kind of. Yeah.
becomes, you have an
Right.
exoskeleton and you become
Correct.
extraordinarily powerful, and able to do things that a normal human being
Mm-hmm.
can do. So it's some version of that, right? You're by training your workforce in these extraordinary tools, you're giving all of them an exoskeleton. You're giving them ability to do things that manually wasn't possibly possible before.
Correct.
Now, with that sense, right? Now, the key thing here is when you have a team, now with that amplification, the ability of the team to work with each other is important, even when trivializing it, but you can get the picture, right? So what I'm saying is that the ability of the team to kind of be positively reinforce each other and back each other up
Correct.
is more important than ever. So if you have, so that the team makeup, right? You have 3 people that are, that love working with each other, you will achieve amazing things. And you have 10 people that are kind of,
Yeah.
some certain challenges, guess what? It's amplified. So bottom line, is that your team's tendencies get amplified. If you have a dysfunctional team, the dysfunction will be amplified, and so will be the functional aspect. So as leaders, I think it's gonna be super, 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 super challenging for them to find this combination to make sure that teams are, in that point where they're gelling to each other and the positive reinforcement, like I said, the exoskeleton, the power each of them have is amplified with each other. I think the tools have make it possible to do that. The actuality of it is dependent on how these teams. And I'm kind of feeling I've seen certain things, and I kind of believe that some of these teams are really amping up to the next level.
Understood. Yeah. So in your experience, are there any use cases where AI did not work as you expected, where it didn't perform at par, right, to your conventional methods, and you had to roll back?
I wouldn't say. I think AI tools have a lot of capabilities, but again, you really have to be very, very thoughtful about its application. So
Right.
if you're building a game using AI, right? Okay, your frame rate is low, or if your game is a little bit short, no harm, no foul, right? I mean, it is
Right.
what it is. But if you're building a healthcare application where you're actually determining care for somebody, and if you're running AI through it, again, the burden on proving that AI is not, AI is behaving in a very predictable
Yeah.
and a very non-biased manner is
Yeah.
paramount. So these are the areas I wouldn't say that it's impractical to use it. I think it's practical. You can quote unquote use it, but there's a huge burden on the as a company, as a developer, to ensure that these are performing as expected. So
Right.
I'll give you an example, right? There was an application built to help with some decisioning, and it took using AI tools maybe 2 weeks to write it, stretch maybe 2 weeks to actually write it, 4 weeks dev complete. The testing of it, right? Again, there's a whole data science around it in terms of testing. There's a lot of scoring. Typical testing is manual testing is super simple, right? It's very subjective. The SME slash your QA folks decide, hey, I'm a functional SME, an expert in this area, so I'm going to determine what the functionality it is that determines its success or its failure. But
Right.
in terms of AI, right now, that subjectiveness is going to backfire on you. It's never going to work. So all you have to do is now you have to do data-driven analysis, meaning that you need to have sufficient evidence and also understand that AI is by very nature works on random input, right? Sometimes if you're asking AI to write a poem, it can every time you ask it, it'll write a different way. So it's not
Right.
like a binary output, right? So that's what
Predictability.
makes
Yeah.
yeah, it's very so you can't always be very subjective and limited. So you need to have an extraordinary area of testing and then do collect a tons of data in a very balanced, right? You need to again be very balanced. You can't be lopsided about it. So you need to determine the balance. I'm trivializing, but there's a whole kind of science behind it. And then to go back to my example, it took 2 weeks to write it, and give or take 3 to 4 months to actually proper test and test that it's working as expected. So we had to actually invent a lot of tooling through that process because manually it was just wasn't possible. So we had to reinvent tooling, build tooling with AI again to do this. But it's a lot of
Right.
fun. Again, I wouldn't call it a failure, but I would say a deep sense of responsibility to ensure that AI is responsibly used, right? It's a financial application, healthcare, anything that makes decisions about people's lives, that affects people's lives, I think needs to be very rigorously tested. And of course, I think in due time, even this whole process might get condensed. But again, at this where we are right now, the burden of testing is high. Again, talking about guardrails, again, it's not enough to just test about it. It's important to monitor it, right? Because number one, hacking of AI is a
Models. Yeah.
thing. People have interesting and figure out interesting ways to hack and make it say,
Right.
you know, um, unexpected things. Let's
Yeah.
just say that.
Unexpected
And
behavior.
imagine if you're a big company and then somebody puts a screenshot on the web, right? I mean, just the impact a certain something like that can have is humongous. Even though you know that you are innocent, someone did that maliciously, still puts you in danger. So I think the whole idea of traditional guarding the application is simple, right? You do sanitization, but
Mm-hmm.
with AI, you need a much deeper well of sanitization, and then both in and out, right? You want to
Correct.
make sure what's being delivered to your AI is is controlled. Also, what AI is giving back to your user is also monitored and also tightly controlled. So I think that is especially key.
Okay. So I think that was my another question that about guardrails and quality. I think glad you covered it. Um, so how to manage these risks? So with the fair usage, like you talked about controlling it, right? So are there any other ways that we can manage these risks? And if we are exposed in chance, right? In case, what can companies do to limit the damage?
I think what companies need to do is have this testing completed to ensure that they have all the data necessary to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that they have done all the right things, right? Things
Right.
can still go wrong. But as long as you have done all the due diligence, right? It at least gives you some idea of protection that at least malicious intent is not present, right? It's very
Mm-hmm.
important that you demonstrate that. But
Right.
again, AI is AI, right? Let's say again, it's very important. If you have proper guardrails, the hope is that you don't end up there, right? If you
Right.
have
Yeah.
the proper thing and you know that, hey, and again, it's AI versus AI, right? Sometimes you have to use AI to monitor AI because guess what? It's all unpredictable. You can always be very, you can't be very semantic about it, right? You can't say, oh, I'm going to look for this and this and that. Sometimes, what if it doesn't fall into that? So you have to think,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be very, very thoughtful about all the scenarios. But I would say its answer is simple, right? To limit damage, I think first of all, I would rank my risk to ensure that who's exposed. So I would really, if it's a series sensitive application, or then I would really tighten it, and I would make sure that it's tested up the wazoo and only released to the people that's supposed to use it. You
Correct.
definitely want people, unwanted people around that, people who don't have business being there using this or having access to it the same time, right? And then that's how I would order it. Again, and the end of the day, let's make sure you have to make sure that you're doing everything humanly possible, or humanly that should be done is done, is recorded, and you've done all the due diligence. And if
Mm-hmm.
things go wrong, you're monitored, you caught it in time, and you show that, hey, you know what, the damage was limited, we caught it, we mitigated it, right? And that to me, like, is a great answer. Right? I think even the best of the technologies blew up, and
Correct.
how many times have you seen Amazon go down or Google go down? So things
Correct.
will
Yeah.
happen. I think we just need to be very, very prepared and very understanding of what to do and what to have in place for that.
Right. So looking ahead, like let's say 12 months or 18 months. So what should these new leaders, right, be preparing for now? Like AI
I think,
leaders are
yeah.
adopting AI, right? So what they should be doing next, if they are
Oh,
already
absolutely
doing.
right. I mean, everybody needs to be careful and
Mm-hmm.
100% right. Very, very. I think leaders are aggressive, understandably so. All the leaders I have seen are super aggressive in ensuring that this revolution is let's say exploited, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or we make use of it correctly and then appropriately. So that is absolutely a top priority for almost every single leader that I've seen. So that is the right thing, in my opinion, because imagine you're a business and now with the whole barriers of entry having lowered so much,
Mm-hmm.
all we need is people with the right intention, the right gumption, the right kind of time and idea to come in and eat your lunch, right? So I think the barriers have lowered quite a bit. So that is something leaders have to keep in mind and understand that the competition is going to be very non-traditional. So you have to keep your eyes peeled and then be ready for a whole host of challenges from small, from places that you've never seen. So I think that is the reality of it. I think going forward, as I mentioned, you always have to start with what you know. What we know is that these tools are going to get way better, wickedly better. So the question is, how are we staying at the edge of it, right? How
Right.
are we revolutionizing our products first before
Mm-hmm.
somebody else does? I think that to me is the key to how leadership can really help and really make a huge difference. And honestly, the tool set is to me is the tool set is easy, right? It doesn't. I don't think it matters that much. What matters is intention, how your teams are working and getting together.
Great, great. I think now we'll have a Q&A session. We'll just go to our LinkedIn board and we'll pick some questions.
Sure. Give me one
Let me
second.
just see. Yeah. And folks, like if you have any questions for Venkat, please feel free to post it. We'll try our best to get you some answers. So we have one question here. It's from Chaitanya Kumar, his product manager. The question is, how do you see AI helping the automation testing corner? As with changing world and difficult scenarios coming in from time to time, how can AI learn to help with validations of negative testing?
Oh yeah, I think yeah. I mean, with testing, AI is already doing so much. I mean, specifically in the scenario, I would say generally across the board, right? I think where AI helps is exactly those complex scenarios. Again, AI is not going to have generalized knowledge about your business. It's
Correct.
how much information you're giving it to it, right? I think that's the key. How much, whether you have a trained models, again, I wouldn't train any models in day and age, but if you have them, you train them properly. Second thing is, are you providing enough context? Then I think AI has the power to actually build these scenarios for you. They're pretty good. They gotten really, really good at it, I think, in terms of outlining the scenarios first and then translating those scenarios and tests. Again, it's a two-step process in my mind. That's always present. Again, it's always about how much context you are providing, how much information you are providing, and in what sense you are capturing and providing the information. I think that's the hard part. In my mind, AI is not going to figure things out on its own. It can code because, again, coding is the same, right? Nowhere you go, Python is going to be Python. So that's the reason coding is accelerated. But rest of the areas are lagging because there's so much subjective, so much domain-specific knowledge. But if you're able to distill that knowledge and then give it to the AI, because some of these context windows are crazy. You can give it a ton of information and you'll be amazed at what it can do with it.
Right. I think yeah, AI can provide you with a solid base of technology, right? Which way to go or what things to look for, some kind of a guidance. I think I agree with you, right? I think subject matter is something still right, people have to provide for at a certain point or validate. So yeah. So yeah, thanks Chaitanya for your question. We'll move on to the next question. What KPIs should we track to measure the success of our AI first transformations? Not just at the product level, but at team and organization levels?
I think the KPIs can be many. I think in this day and age, especially if you are, organized, let's say Git around companies like GitHub, they offer you a ton of tools to actually measure, right, how much AI-driven development you are doing, as an example.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it really depends on what your organization goals are, right? I think there's no one stop rule all. If you're a government agency and you're mandated by law to do things certain way, right? Again, you have to measure against those things. But that's where I mean, serious productivity gain, like how much story point you're shipping per all the way from there to how much AI is influencing your code base to, your velocity transformation, right? And however that measure, I mean, to me, like that comes to the top of my mind as a thing. But also, I think the important thing is, I think from a team's perspective, how fast your team is coming up to speed, right? How fast are they adopting AI? I think that's also key. I think it's not just output; it's about how fast people are able to take up, right? And that to me is an opportunity where leaders can step in and address what's causing them. Maybe they're under a lot of pressure; they don't have time to even consider AI. Right? To me, like maybe that's where leaders can step in and help the team in, kind of whatever has to be done to address the issue. I think that's where those are some of the KPIs that I can come up with. But again, it's anything. I mean, anything that's productivity related could be a great KPI. Whatever is important for that company. If you're a startup, obviously your velocity is everything. But if you are
Right.
like a huge company, then you may want to have some realistic goals.
Understood. I think, yeah, we'll stop there, Venkat. That was a great session. Thanks.
Awesome.
And I'm sure our viewers have benefited from it. So thank you. And we also thank our viewers who have tuned in from all over the world. On that note, we will end this episode of TechGrit Talks. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.